Daniel Carter had always been known as the dependable one. At 34, he worked as a senior accountant at a respected firm in the city. His colleagues admired his calm voice and steady hands. His family leaned on him for everything: financial advice, emotional support, decisions that no one else wanted to make. If life was a machine, Daniel was the quiet gear that kept it running. And gears, unfortunately, were never meant to stop. Every morning, his alarm rang at 6 a.m. sharp. He would sit at the edge of his bed for a few seconds, staring at the wall as if preparing himself for battle. His small apartment was neat, almost sterile. No pictures hung on the walls except one, his parents on their 30th anniversary, smiling as if the world had never disappointed them. Daniel carried their expectations like a second spine. His father had worked in a factory his entire life, hands rough from labor. "You will have a better life," he used to say. "You will not struggle like I did." And Daniel had believed that success meant eliminating struggle entirely. But struggle had a way of slipping through even the strongest doors. At work, the pressure had been mounting for months. The company was going through a financial audit, and mistakes, small, technical ones, had begun appearing in the books. They weren't Daniel's, but as the senior accountant, he was responsible. His manager, Mr. Lawson, had started calling him into the office more frequently. "Daniel, I trust you," he would say, tapping his pen against the desk. "But the board is nervous. We can't afford errors right now." Daniel would nod. "I understand." And he did understand. Too well. He began staying late every night, double-checking every line of every report. Midnight became normal. Coffee replaced sleep. His eyes burned constantly, but he told himself it was temporary, just until the audit was over. Meanwhile, his mother called every evening. "Are you eating properly?" she would ask. "Yes, Ma." "Are you sleeping?" "Of course." He lied gently, so she wouldn't worry. But worry had already found him. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. Daniel was presenting a financial summary to the board. The room felt unusually warm. As he spoke, the numbers on the screen blurred. His heartbeat grew louder, thumping in his ears like a drum. He tried to continue, but the words tangled in his throat. "Daniel!" Mr. Lawson's voice sounded distant. Suddenly, he couldn't breathe. He gripped the edge of the table. The room spun. For a terrifying moment, he thought he was having a heart attack. Then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on a couch in the office lounge. A paramedic was checking his pulse. "You had a panic attack," she explained gently. "Severe stress can do this." Daniel felt embarrassed more than anything. Panic attack? That sounded weak. Fragile. He wasn't fragile. "I'm fine," he insisted, sitting up. But he wasn't fine. The following days were worse. Sleep became impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw spreadsheets and read warning numbers. His chest tightened randomly. Small noises startled him. Yet he kept going to work, because stopping felt like failure. One evening, as he stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, he barely recognized the man looking back. Dark circles framed his eyes. His face looked thinner, older. He pressed his hands against the sink. "How did it come to this?" he whispered. The second crack came when he visited his parents that weekend. His father was sitting in his usual armchair, watching television. His mother was in the kitchen, humming softly. It was the same house Daniel had grown up in, simple, warm, safe. During dinner, his father said proudly, "Your uncle was telling everyone about you. Senior accountant at such a young age. We are lucky. Lucky." Daniel forced a smile. After the meal, his mother noticed his trembling hands. "Daniel," she said softly, "what's wrong?" "Nothing. Don't lie to me. I carried you for 9 months. I know when something is heavy on your heart." The words broke something inside him. 4 years, he had been the strong one, the provider, the problem solver. He had never allowed himself to be the one who needed help. But suddenly, he was tired of pretending. "I can't do it anymore," he admitted, voice shaking. I'm exhausted. I feel like if I slow down for 1 second, everything will collapse. I'm scared all the time. Silence filled the room. His father muted the television. I thought being successful meant you wouldn't suffer like we did, Daniel continued. But I'm suffering anyway. His mother reached across the table and held his hand. Success is not the absence of suffering, she said. It is knowing when to rest. His father nodded slowly. Son, I worked hard so you wouldn't have to break yourself. Not so you would break in a different way. Daniel felt tears he hadn't allowed in years. The breaking point, he realized, wasn't the panic attack in the boardroom. It was this moment when he finally admitted he was human. The following Monday, Daniel requested a meeting with Mr. Lawson. I need time off, he said, steady but firm. I've been pushing beyond my limits, and it's affecting my health. Mr. Lawson looked surprised, but not angry. You should have said something earlier, he replied. We'll manage. Take 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The words felt unreal. During those weeks, Daniel did simple things. He slept. He walked in the park near his apartment. He read novels he had abandoned years ago. He visited his parents again, this time without checking emails every 5 minutes. He also began seeing a therapist. At first, he felt awkward talking about feelings he had buried for years. But slowly, he learned something profound. Strength wasn't about carrying everything alone. It was about knowing your limits. When he returned to work, nothing had collapsed. The company was still standing. The audit continued. The world had not ended because Daniel had paused. But something inside him had changed. He set boundaries. He left the office at a reasonable hour. He delegated tasks instead of absorbing them. And when stress crept back in, as it inevitably did, he acknowledged it instead of denying it. Months later, during another board presentation, he felt a flicker of nervousness. His heart beat faster. But this time he breathed. Slowly, deeply. The numbers remained clear. His voice remained steady. Daniel Carter had reached his breaking point. And instead of shattering, he had rebuilt himself. Because sometimes, the moment you think you are falling apart is actually the moment you begin to understand what truly matters. And sometimes, breaking is the first step toward healing. The weeks after Daniel's return were not magically perfect. Healing, he learned, was not a straight line. It bent and twisted like a narrow road through fog. Some mornings he woke up feeling lighter, almost hopeful. Other days, a quiet weight pressed against his chest, reminding him that stress had not vanished. It had simply changed shape. At work, the audit entered its final phase. Tension still hung in the air, but Daniel approached it differently now. Instead of volunteering for every extra task, he paused before answering. Instead of saying, I'll handle it, he sometimes said, let's divide this. The first time he did that, it felt unnatural. During a team meeting, a junior accountant named Mia hesitantly mentioned she could review part of the report. The old Daniel would have smiled politely and said, No, it's fine. I've got it. But this time he nodded. That would help a lot. Thank you. He noticed something surprising. Mia looked relieved, even grateful to be trusted. For years, Daniel had believed that carrying everything alone was responsibility. Now he realized it had also been control. By not sharing the burden, he had unintentionally told others they weren't capable. The shift was small but powerful. Outside of work, Daniel's therapist asked him a question that lingered in his mind for days. When did you decide that your worth depended on performance? Daniel didn't have an immediate answer, but memories slowly surfaced, bringing home perfect grades, watching his father's tired smile widen with pride, hearing relatives say, he will take care of the family one day, receiving applause for achievements, not for simply existing. He had learned early that love often arrived wrapped in accomplishment. It wasn't that his parents had demanded perfection. They had simply wanted him to have opportunities they never had. But somewhere along the way, Daniel had translated opportunity into obligation. an obligation into pressure. One evening, he visited his parents again. This time, the conversation felt different. His father was in the garden, trimming the small guava tree that had grown taller over the years. Daniel stood beside him. "You've been coming home more often," his father said casually. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "I realized I missed it." His father adjusted his glasses. "Your mother tells me you're seeing someone to talk about stress." Daniel hesitated, but didn't deny it. "Yes." His father nodded thoughtfully. "When I was your age, I didn't have that option. We just worked until we were too tired to think." "Did it make it easier?" Daniel asked. His father gave a soft, almost amused smile. "No, it just made us quiet." That sentence settled deeply in Daniel's chest. Silence had been inherited like an unspoken family trait. Endure. Don't complain. Keep moving. But Daniel was beginning to understand that silence wasn't strength, it was survival. And he no longer wanted to merely survive. Back at the office, the audit results were finally announced. Minor discrepancies, nothing catastrophic. The company would face some restructuring, but no one would lose their job. The relief in the building was almost physical. Laughter returned to the hallways. Coffee breaks became longer. Even Mr. Lawson seemed lighter. "Good work, everyone," he said during the staff meeting. Then he glanced at Daniel. "And thank you for leading the team through a difficult time." Applause filled the room. Daniel felt the familiar warmth of recognition, but it didn't consume him like before. It was pleasant, but not necessary for his sense of worth. Later that day, Mia approached him again. "I just wanted to say," she said, "when you collapsed that day, it scared me. I realized I've been pushing myself the same way. Seeing you take time off, it made me think maybe I should take better care of myself too." Daniel blinked in surprise. He had always assumed that showing weakness would reduce respect. Instead, it had created space for honesty. "Thank you," he replied quietly. "Just don't wait until you collapse." She smiled. "I won't." That evening, Daniel walked home under a sky painted in soft orange and purple. The air felt cooler than usual, brushing against his face like a gentle reminder that seasons change whether we notice or not. He thought about the phrase, breaking point. For months, he had feared it like an edge he must never approach. But now he saw it differently. A breaking point wasn't always destruction. Sometimes it was a boundary your body and mind drew when you refused to. Sometimes it was a warning sign disguised as failure. And sometimes it was a door. At home, Daniel stood before the photograph of his parents again. 4 years, he had seen it as a symbol of expectation. Tonight, it looked like something else, a reminder of love. Love had never required him to break. He picked up his phone and sent a message to his therapist. "I think I understand something now. I don't need to be unbreakable. I just need to be honest." Then he placed the phone down and opened the window. Cool night air flowed into the room, replacing the stale stillness he hadn't noticed before. For the first time in a long while, Daniel didn't feel like a gear in a machine. He felt like a person. Imperfect, vulnerable, still learning, but whole. And as he lay down to sleep, he understood something quietly revolutionary. The true breaking point is not when you collapse. It is when you refuse to listen to yourself any longer. Daniel had listened, and in doing so, he hadn't broken at all. He had begun again. Change did not announce itself loudly in Daniel's life. It arrived quietly, like sunlight slowly filling a room. A few months after the audit ended, the company began restructuring departments. Whispers traveled across desks. New titles were being created. Leadership roles were shifting. One afternoon, Mr. Lawson called Daniel into his office again. The same office where Daniel had once struggled to breathe. This time, he walked in calmly. "Daniel," Mr. Lawson began, folding his hands on the desk, "the board is creating a new position, Director of Financial Operations. It's more strategic, less technical. More leadership." Daniel listened carefully. "We'd like you to take it." The words hung in the air. A year ago, Daniel would have accepted immediately. Promotion meant progress. Progress meant worth. Worth meant safety. But now he paused. What would the responsibilities look like? He asked. Mr. Lawson raised an eyebrow, impressed by the measured tone. You'd oversee the department. Delegate more. Fewer late-night spreadsheets, more decision-making. Would the workload be manageable? Daniel asked directly. It can be, Mr. Lawson replied honestly, if you build the right team. Daniel felt something shift inside him. He wasn't afraid of work anymore. He was afraid of losing himself again. I'll accept, he said slowly. But with one condition. Mr. Lawson leaned back. Which is, I want structured team support, shared accountability, no more culture of silent burnout. There was a brief silence. Then Mr. Lawson smiled. That's exactly why we want you. The promotion was announced the following week. Applause filled the conference room once again, but this time, Daniel didn't feel pressure tightening his chest. He felt grounded. Leadership, he realized, wasn't about absorbing stress. It was about distributing it wisely. As director, Daniel implemented changes that seemed small at first. Rotating deadlines, mandatory leave usage, open mental health discussions during quarterly meetings. Some employees were skeptical, but gradually, something shifted. People started speaking up earlier. Mistakes were addressed without fear. Overtime hours decreased, and productivity did not suffer. In fact, it improved. One evening, as Daniel was preparing to leave the office at 6 p.m., a habit he now guarded fiercely, Mia knocked lightly on his door. You're leaving already, she teased. On time, Daniel corrected with a grin. She stepped inside. I just wanted to say, the environment feels different now. Healthier. Daniel looked around his office. It was still filled with reports and forecasts, but it no longer felt like a cage. I learned the hard way, he admitted. I don't recommend it. She nodded thoughtfully. You know, when you collapsed that day, I thought it meant you weren't strong enough. Now I realize it meant you were human. Human. The word felt liberating. That weekend, Daniel took his parents to a small seaside town for a short trip. It was the first vacation he had planned without checking his email schedule in advance. His mother stood barefoot on the sand, laughing as waves brushed her ankles. His father squinted toward the horizon, quiet but content. Daniel watched them and felt something gentle expand inside his chest. For so long, he had believed his role was to protect them from struggle. But they had never asked him to carry the world. They had only wanted him to live. That evening, sitting by the shore, his father spoke without looking at him. You seem lighter. I feel lighter, Daniel replied. His father nodded. I used to think breaking meant failure, but sometimes we must bend in a storm to avoid snapping. Daniel smiled softly. I think I finally understand that. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, waves rising and falling in rhythm. Even the sea had movement, pressure, release. Pressure, release. Nothing strong remained rigid forever. Months turned into a year. Daniel's life was not free of stress. Deadlines still existed. Unexpected problems still surfaced. But he approached them differently. When anxiety whispered, he listened. When exhaustion knocked, he rested. When fear appeared, he acknowledged it instead of denying it. One afternoon, during a company seminar on workplace wellness, Daniel was asked to speak about resilience. He stood at the podium, remembering the day he had nearly fainted in front of this same audience. I used to think resilience meant never cracking, he began. But that's not true. Resilience means recognizing cracks early, before they become fractures. The room was silent. I reached my breaking point once, he continued, and I thought it was the end of my credibility. Instead, it became the beginning of self-awareness. He paused, scanning the faces in front of him. If you're exhausted, say it. If you're overwhelmed, admit it. Strength is not silence. Strength is honesty. When he finished, the applause felt different from any he had received before. It wasn't for perfect performance. It was for authenticity. That night, Daniel returned to his apartment and stood again before the old photograph on the wall. He didn't see pressure anymore. He saw love, effort, sacrifice, and humanity. He no longer felt like a gear. He felt like a man who had learned to bend without breaking. And perhaps that was the true lesson of the breaking point. It is not where you end. It is where you decide to change. Daniel Carter had once feared collapse. Now he understood that the breaking point had not destroyed him. It had revealed him. And in that revelation, he found not weakness, but freedom. 2 years later, Daniel barely recognized the man he used to be. Not because his life had become perfect, but because he no longer chased perfection. The company had grown steadily under its new structure. The culture Daniel helped shape had taken root in ways he hadn't expected. Employees were more open. Sick days were no longer whispered about. Deadlines were firm, but humane. Burnout was no longer a badge of honor. One afternoon, Daniel received an email from a young applicant named Arif, who had just joined the company as a junior analyst. "Sir, may I speak with you? Not about work, about something personal." Daniel remembered writing similar emails in his mind years ago, never daring to send them. He replied, "Of course. My door is open." When Arif entered the office, his shoulders were tense, his eyes restless. "I'm trying to prove myself," he said quickly. "I stay late every night. I volunteer for everything. But I feel tired all the time. And scared. Like if I slow down, I'll disappear." The words hit Daniel like an echo from the past. He didn't lecture. He didn't correct. Instead, he leaned back and said gently, "Let me tell you a story." He told Arif about the audit, the panic attack, the fear of seeming weak, the night he admitted to his parents that he couldn't carry everything alone. Arif listened quietly. "I thought my breaking point meant I wasn't strong enough," Daniel said. "But it actually showed me I was ignoring myself. What if I'm already close to mine?" Arif asked softly. "Then it's not too late," Daniel replied. "Breaking is a warning, not a verdict." They spoke for nearly an hour. When Arif left, he looked lighter, if only slightly. Daniel sat alone afterward, reflecting. The breaking point had once felt like the darkest chapter of his life. Now, it had become the foundation of something meaningful. That evening, he visited his parents again. His father's hair was grayer. His mother moved a little slower. Time, like stress, did not pause for anyone. During dinner, his mother said, "You seem peaceful." Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "I used to think peace would come when I achieved enough," he said. "But it came when I stopped trying to prove myself." His father smiled. "You finally learned what took me 40 years to understand." "And what's that?" Daniel asked. "That life is not a competition with exhaustion." They all laughed softly. Later that night, Daniel stepped outside into the quiet neighborhood street. The air was cool, the sky scattered with faint stars. He remembered the man who once stood in a bathroom, staring at a hollow reflection. He had believed that stopping meant failing. He had believed that asking for help meant weakness. He had believed that worth came from endurance. He was wrong. Worth came from balance. Strength came from boundaries. Growth came from honesty. Daniel had not avoided his breaking point. He had walked straight into it and discovered it was not a cliff, but a crossroads. Years from now, he knew there would be new pressures, new challenges. Life would test him again in different ways. But now he understood something essential. He did not need to be unbreakable. He only needed to be aware. As he drove home that night, he felt no urgency to check emails, no tightness in his chest, no fear of slowing down, just quiet clarity. The breaking point had once felt like the end of control. In truth, it had been the beginning of choice. And Daniel chose, every day after, to live not as a machine built to endure, but as a human being allowed to rest, to feel, to ask for help, and to breathe. Because sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who never fall. They are the ones who learn how to rise differently. And Daniel Carter had finally risen, not above his limits, but within them.